Welcome to Compose Yourself, the podcast where academic writing meets self-discovery for the students at the Chicago School.
I'm Jason.
And I'm Cindy.
Whether you're crafting your first essay or refining your voice as a writer, we're here to guide you through the art of composition.
From brainstorming to final drafts, we'll break down the tools and techniques to help you think critically, write effectively, and express yourself with confidence.
So, grab a pen, open your mind, and
compose yourself. Welcome to the Module 3 podcast. This week we're going to be talking about the Shatilla reading that we've been working on in this class, and Jason and I are going to talk about our collaborative annotation of that article. And we're going to chat a little bit about our own approaches to annotation and how we engage with texts, how we stay engaged when we're trying to read something that's lengthy, and sort of the things that we do to support our own understanding of a reading. So why make a group annotation, Jason? I mean, I feel like this is kind of a strange thing to do, but I feel like one of the reasons we thought it might be important for us to walk through doing annotation in this way is because we use the word annotation in this class a couple of different times and in different contexts. So we're asking our students in this class to do an annotated bibliography, and then we keep talking about annotating while you read. So I just want to clarify that an annotated bibliography is a slightly different thing. It means you're annotating in the sense that you write those little paragraphs about what that reading was, and you're putting it in your own words. So in that sense, it's an annotation. And then when we talk about annotating a text, we're talking about putting your own words on that text, writing in the margins, underlining, highlighting. And then we're going to also talk through the ways that digital annotation has special affordances, which just is a fancy way of saying it lets you do stuff that maybe paper doesn't let you do. But I think that doing it this way, getting to see how you engage with a text and how you maybe annotate a text and how I do it, might be great for our students. It might help them see the different ways that readers engage, even readers like us who have similar disciplines, similar backgrounds, similar training. We're going to engage with things differently and for different reasons, which means that when two people read the same text, the same, in this case, article, and they're going to write about it later, maybe, we're going to write different things because we read different ways. So you're going to pull different things out of it than I would. You might utilize that text in a different argument or in a different way. So I think this could be a really fun way of giving that example that two people can engage in something and get very different things out of it. So, Jason, what are some different ways that readers can engage with the text, and how do you see that sort of working as you're going through?
I mean, I think kind of going back to our Comp 1 terms, I think it really depends upon your purpose, so what you're trying to achieve, and the position you're taking, right? Because we don't, it is very rare in academic work. You don't just pick up an article, read it, and call it a day. You're trying to do something. You have an assignment, or maybe you're doing a research project, or you're trying to get published, and you already have certain opinions, certain beliefs. You've read different things in the past. So those, like, kind of all of that comes together. The you of engaging with the text gives you a unique perspective. Even if you are students in the same exact class, like my friend and I love to take classes with each other, and we would have wildly different interpretations. So I think it's important to know, kind of going back to that research proposal, what are your research questions? What kind of are your interests on the topic? Where are you kind of leaning on going with this? Because that's going to influence the notes you're going to take.
Right. So even though all of our students read this article in the read track and we are reading it together, this is a great model for the kinds of annotating they need to be doing while they're reading for their research paper and the kinds of note-taking skills. But I think it's really helpful to just see how other people pull those things out of the reading. So I'm hoping that's what we can kind of get across for our students today as they watch us engage with this in our group annotation document. But before we do that, I want to show in pictures what it looks like for me to do the first reading of the Shatilla article because I am a paper reader.
Okay.
So I'm going to
Okay.
share a little bit about that. So let me get my screen shared. Okay, are you able to see my screen?
Oh gosh, now you're bringing me back.
So, I think we've talked before about like knowing yourself, right? You need to know yourself and your own how you deal with like longer readings and how you keep yourself engaged. Okay, one of those things for me is I have to read paper. I'm trying to transition more to digital reading, but it's not my first choice. So I decided to show an example of what it looks like.
Okay.
So these are just pictures. I translated all of this into our shared document, which we're going to show the students. But this is what it looks like. And the check mark in the corner, oddly, will always be there when I read something. It means that I read it.
Good to know.
Because if
Good
they
to
have
know.
like a stack of them that you need to read for
Uh-huh.
your project, I always just put a check so I know that I read that one. So I start by like anytime there's a circle, it means I don't know what that means. Either I don't know what it means at all, or I don't know what it means in this context. So I circle words that I need to look up or terms that I don't understand. And then I'll draw an arrow and I will write the definition because I will look it up in the dictionary app on my phone. So that's kind of like the process for me. I always read the abstract first, obviously. And then I just go through and circle words. I underline things that I think are important. Like these italicized word. If you see an italicized word,
Huh.
it's important because that's they're changing the formatting to catch your attention. So tip, italicized words, important. So then I just like wrote things in the margin that I thought were really important. Like this is where they go over the purpose of the study, which, if you're reading a scholarly article,
Or
you're going to want to, or, they're doing research, you want to find the purpose of the study always. So within that purpose, there were a couple of terms that I didn't really understand. Like I don't have any background with this role conflict theory and community of inquiry. I don't know what those things are. So I had to look them up and we'll talk about how I did that. But in this case, I just like wrote the most important points on the margin. So I also put like where I could go for more information. Here, like there's this Garrison et al. Article that could connect some dots. So I did that. I don't usually use a lot of highlighters, but sometimes I will if I want to block things. And I always say what I'm interested in the corner. Like, so this non-traditional students, the points they were making about it, I really connected with that because I've always been a non-traditional student. I have never just gone to school. I've always gone to school and had a family and worked and lots of things. So I really always try to point out those connections because where you connect with something is where your best writing comes from, right? Like if you can get
so true.
personally connected.
So true.
So this is just an example of like what it looks like for me. I always use these stars where something's really important. If I really like something, I put a heart. See, this is very scholarly and
Of
specific.
course.
Um, and I underline things that I think are important. So I wanted to show that just as sort of an example of it's messy. I have messy handwriting. I, have a very unsophisticated key with stars and hearts and exclamation points. But my brain knows what those things mean. So
Right.
this is
Right.
what works well for me. But there are some special and important affordances to using a digital method, and that's what we want to show them today, right?
Well, and real fast before we leave, so you did this physically, but it looks like you still used your device, like some kind of digital device, right? When you wanted to look up a term or when you were
Absolutely.
maybe finding that
Absolutely.
article or
Yes. So I engaged with a dictionary, obviously, because there were terms I looked up, but I also actually, in this case, used AI to help
Oh,
me
okay.
with some of the terminology. So, do you want me to go over that now or wait until later?
Sure, why not?
Okay, so I didn't know what role conflict theory was, and I didn't know what community of inquiry. And it's in this reading like a lot of times, right? So you kind of need to know what those things are. They're making some assumptions about their reader. They're assuming that the person that reads this is going to know these terms. Well, I don't, and I'm assuming that our students might not. So I went to good old ChatGPT, and I also used Copilot to see if they would say different things. And I just said, can you explain this to me? So what I didn't do was go to ChatGPT and give it the Shatilla article and ask it to summarize it for me. I did not
Okay,
do
okay.
that because my work is to read that article. That's the work that I need to be doing. But I can leverage it to help me with what that work assumes I know that I might not. So it gave me a really good high level. Obviously, there's a lot more to these theories. There's depth and richness to these things that are not going to be given to you by a simple prompt. But this gives me some background, like helps me understand, like especially these two types of roles, like inner conflict and intra role, like where students have conflicting expectations with different roles, like they are student, but they're also a parent or whatever. And then when they have conflicting roles within the same role, like when they have conflict within the same role, I mean. So
Right.
that helped me understand role theory. So then I asked it, can you explain community of inquiry framework? And it did at a high level. It said these three things are really important. It gave me who developed this
Like
theory,
from
this
our last
framework.
podcast, you would go to the library and double check
Then
that,
I
right?
would go to the library and look for Garrison et al. 2000 and see if I could find that reading and get more depth. Um, so if I was going to write about community of inquiry, then I would need to go find the Garrison et al. Reading because that's where it comes from. So I'd need to go to the library and get that. If I just need to know a little bit about what this means for the purpose of understanding the Shatilla article, this is sufficient, right? It's giving me a little
Right,
high
right.
level. It's not super important that I dive deeply into it unless it's something I want to write about. So it gave me these three things as really important in communities of inquiry, cognitive and social and teaching presence. So I was like, oh, great. I asked it, could you give me these, like what are these foundational sources that I need that I could go read to help me? And it again gave me this Garrison reading. So then I now have a DOI that I can go to the library and find this article and use the library. Um,
Okay.
Another way you could use this tool is say, can you give me a real world example? So let's say you read, the definition of community of inquiry and you're still not sure. You could say, can you give me a real world example of what community of inquiry looks like? And
Oh,
it can
that's a good
also
idea.
give you that.
That's a good idea.
What I wouldn't do is ask it to summarize the reading that you are engaging with. Use it to support your own reading. So I'm reading Shatilla, but I can definitely use AI and leverage its power to help support my own reading. So if there are words I don't know, you don't have to go to the dictionary app anymore. You could try this. There are just ways that you can engage with it like this that help you support your own reading. Does that make sense?
And well, I was about to say, and did it like after you went
Absolutely.
and you asked these questions, then you went back to the readings, did things kind of click more and you understood and
Yes, it definitely helped me to see that there were things the writer assumes about the reader.
oh,
They assume their reader is a certain kind of person, maybe has a certain kind of educational background, knows what these terms mean. I am not maybe their target reader, but I'm
okay.
reading it. So using AI in this way helps sort of fill the gap, if that makes sense. Like
Yeah,
the gap between
absolutely.
who I am as the reader and who they're assuming their reader is.
Well, no, I think that's fantastic. It's awesome.
So let me switch over to our group annotation and
There it
Jason,
is.
why don't you set us up a little bit? Like, what did we do to set this up so that
Oh
we could
gosh.
group annotate together?
I mean, so there are those other programs that are out there and available. Even in Adobe PDF Reader, the Acrobat Reader, you can add annotations, and I've done that in the past. But a lot of them aren't as friendly for group annotation. So we just copy and pasted the article and put it straight into Word. And it works for our our purposes, but you have to be careful when you do that. Sometimes it doesn't all copy properly. Especially if there's charts or graphs, sometimes those can struggle to go over to Word. And you also want to make sure that you keep yourself organized. So, in all honesty, I actually usually have a separate document where I just keep an APA reference entry and citation for everything that I'm reading. And then I copy and paste it over if I'm going to do annotations like this. Because you want to know, like, wait, which article am I annotating and what is this in reference to? Um, so we didn't really do that here, but we do have that information about, the title and the author and where it came from, DOI.
Right.
So yeah, we just kind of set it up like that. And then we gave it to each other again. We said we're going to meet back at a specified date, and we just kind of went off on it. And sometimes, like we would make comments because we both read this a couple of times, and sometimes we would make a comment, and I get on the next day, and oh, Cindy's left a comment. And other times, like we were responding to each other. We were kind of actively engaging with each other in the comments and through the highlights. So yeah, that's kind of how we arrived at this document. Should
I
we
think it
walk
would
through it?
be great if our students just decided, hey, classmate, do you want to do this
Oh,
together?
sorry,
And
student.
they kind of collaborated on their annotating. I think that's wonderful because I learn things from your annotations and you can garner
Oh,
things
same,
from mine.
same.
So I do think it's really helpful to kind of pair up and do it as a team if you can, especially if you're reading something together. I think it's really useful. So
Absolutely.
the nice thing, one of the affordances, let's say, of using this is that you can click on the comment and it's going to take you to where the comment is, where is it linked? So like I want to know where what this comment is pointing
Oh,
to,
okay.
and it'll show you. So that does help when you're annotating together. Um, like I've highlighted this word and I've added my comment, and this was one where we kind of went back and forth because they kept using this term attrition, and in my previous employment, like I knew what attrition meant, but it was like usually used in terms of like whether jobs were filled and stuff. So I was like,
Right, right.
I don't understand how they're using it in this context. And so we kind of like went back and forth a little bit trying to make sense of
I have a
how they're
history
using it.
background,
And
so I was thinking like military attrition. I'm like, people are
right,
dying. Like, what is
right, what's
happening?
happening? People are getting fired or dying. So you had a really great idea though. Like I'm using the Merriam-Webster and I'm like, this still doesn't seem to make any sense. And Jason, so you found a source that made perfect sense, and linked it here. So can you talk about that for just a minute?
Yeah, because I was thinking it was like, well, this is obviously a psychology paper. These are psychologists who are writing this. I should go to the APA dictionary. And to be absolutely honest with you, I didn't even know if APA had a dictionary. So I, kind of did a Google prompt of APA plus definition plus and the word just to see if there was some kind of resource that they had put out to clarify their terms. And I found that link. So it didn't take me too long using Google, but thinking about, who the authors are and who their audience was can kind of help you find those resources that, even if it's a reference work or a dictionary or an encyclopedia, whatever it is, and I think it'll provide a little bit more context to that discipline.
That's so
Um,
smart. It's so smart. And it was so helpful to me because I hadn't thought of that approach. So this is sort of the nice thing about having a group reading is that you get the benefit of somebody else's brilliant thought. And
right,
I love
right.
how you use the affordances of digital annotation to sort of link these things. So not only did you put the definition in here, there are hyperlinks to where you found these other definitions, and then to the spot itself. So that's one of the things that's really nice is that if you annotate your documents digitally, you can use the ability to hyperlink. So if you and often if you're reading digitally and they hyperlink their source material, you can get to that easier. So the paper copy is nice for some things because sometimes it helps my memory quite a bit to handwrite something. But there are just real benefits to being able to hyperlink, and this was really nice and very helpful. So,
And I mean, it
um,
was honestly even the same with the ChatGPT because my problem with some of these reference works is that I'm almost kind of like the oh look, squirrel, and I run off. So sometimes with the digital, I will go and I look something up and oh that looks interesting. And then before I know it, I have 30 tabs open of
And then
all
you're
this stuff
down
that
the
I'm
rabbit
reading.
hole.
Right, right. And I'm like, oh, I need to get back to work. So there's definitely affordances, but again, like kind of know your place. Maybe use different technology to help keep you focused because you
Yeah,
don't want to go too deep down the rabbit hole on an annotation
right,
yet,
right.
at least for the first read.
It's fairly
Uh,
hard not to, though, sometimes.
oh, it is.
Um, so here, this is an example of how I like tried to translate my very scholarly and professional key of using stars and hearts. So I used a star here to and a bold font to try and say that this is where the research gap is being identified in this article. So when you're
Very
reading
important.
scholarly research, you want to find what they're saying the gap is that they're trying to fill with the research. So this is where they're pointing out what's been done and what needs to be done still. So I would say that's like an important key in this reading. So I put a little star there. Then here, um, they talked about sense of belonging, which is just something that I'm very interested in. So I put a heart, the old school kind of way. Before you could use pictures,
Little emoji.
you use these, and so that was the only way. Like Word wouldn't let me put one in like a real emoji in there, so I had to use this, which works because I know what it means, right? Like
I
as
know. I
a
think at
as a
first I was
reader.
like, is that, are you doing
I'm
half
sure you were
here?
like,
Greater than,
wait,
less
what?
than? Like, what's
Less
the
than
alligator
three
mean?
what? Um, but as a reader, I know what it means, so it helps me remember, oh, if I have to pick a topic to write about and I want to use this as a source, I'm going to look for the hearts because that's where your interest lies. And if you can get interested in something, it's way easier to write about it. So I always try to just kind of grab onto those things that hit a topic that really interests me.
Well, and a
Um,
footnote to that is that, I think a lot of students forget that you really should be reading these multiple times. And then especially when once you start writing, if you've over annotated, which isn't always bad, but sometimes it can be hard. Like,
mm.
oh, I needed that one quote or that one piece of information, and now you're looking at, dozens of annotations. So I really like the heart method as a way to just very quickly find the most essential information you need in those annotations.
And maybe for a student, it's different colors of highlighter, or it's,
Great,
a
great.
different, they only underline when it's something they really, really connect with. So you can pick your own method, right? Pick your own adventure when you're reading.
Everybody has to use hearts.
But right, nobody has to use hearts. But for me, I know that that's the indication. This
Mhm.
is something I'm interested in. This is ripe. Pick this if you have to. Um,
Right, right.
so then we kind of just like kept going back and forth. Like you make some really interesting points about like what I loved about your annotations that I didn't do nearly as much as you did was ask questions of the text. Can you talk a little bit
Ooh.
about taking that sort of hat where you're asking more questions of the text? Because that's something I tend to just like highlight and receive, and I don't ask enough questions of the text sometimes. So please talk about that a little bit.
My gosh, it's not, I don't think it's natural. I didn't always do it, but I think that as I kept going in college, these are still right credible. Like they're peer reviewed, these are credible, they're authoritative. But I had a teacher or somebody that, just because it's authoritative doesn't make them the authority. That you should still turn that brain on. And even if it's, maybe it's agree or disagree with some part of the text, maybe it's checking your own understanding. Like maybe, and I think in that one, if it's the right one, I had a confusion. Um, and I was just like, well, I don't get the connections that you're making. I don't understand this. And so I just always now I just try to think in that questioning mode of anytime that something confuses me, agree or disagree, whatever it is, I'm going to frame it as a question because then on my second or my third reading, when I go back to it, maybe I have the answer now, or maybe even I've, generated something great that I can put in my writing.
Yes. And
Maybe
I'm
showing the
showing here on the
limitations of the
screen,
study.
I've kind of scrolled to where you did a series of this really smart questioning of the text. So you have several in a row here, like why are they just now bringing up student loan debt? like you found that very confusing. Great point. Um, then I get it, but what about the link to, you're finding some difficulty with the logical progression of the
Right.
argument that they're making. And then you're like, why? I need to read this source. So some fact that they brought in from this other source, you're saying like, okay, well, that happened, but why? So I thought that was really helpful because it's pretty clear if you look at mine that I didn't do nearly as much question mark, asking of the questions. And that's something that I gain from watching a different reader engage with the text.
And maybe, I'm sure you probably ask the questions in your head. But I found that I tend to be, again, one of those who's so kind of out there and spastic and doing a million things that if I don't write the questions down, then when I return to the text, I'm going to forget about it. And
Yes,
like I said, most of my greatest writing and stuff has come out of those questions. So I write it down right at the beginning.
I think the point that you're making though about um, that these people are not somehow perfect and everything that they have to say we should accept as the truth, capital T. I think that's a really important point because I think as students, it can often feel like, well, this person is a published Dr. So and so.
Right.
So,
Right.
it can start to feel like you don't have the agency or authority to say, wow, this doesn't make any sense. Because that's something I would really love our students to understand is if something doesn't make sense to you, there's a possibility that it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
That it's not that you don't get it. You can certainly try and do your research, look up words you don't know, work with AI to fill those gaps if there's a knowledge gap. But don't assume that everything they say is going to be perfectly easy to understand it, or it's your fault. I think that was really key, and I think it's helpful for our students to think of it that way. Okay, so we continued on. We did lots of underlining, reacting to the text. I love when I see us do like,
We
wow,
both
or
did that. Like,
personal connection or whatever. I often do like I don't know why. AHHH. If something's like really
ah,
interesting to me. And I do that. I know I do that because I had a college professor that every time I said something that she liked, she would put next to it like, you're onto something there. And I really liked that. So that was 25 years ago, 30, something like that, almost. And I will never forget it. It's one of the things I really loved about that instructor. So I still do it if something interests me. So I love how we still have our own kind of key. Like you have a key, your key is question
mhm,
marks. Your
mhm.
key is questions. Like that's how you know something was interesting to you. Is there anything in particular that you want to make sure we talk about in this group annotation other than what we have so far?
I mean, I really think we've kind of just, highlighted it. It's hard because we could go through every single instance. Um, but I think just showing those differences of approach based upon our own past experience, our past knowledge, our familiarity with different tools, it really just show that different readers, as you said, make different writers. And that's okay. Like that's exactly what we want out of students. I don't want every single paper to sound the same. No new knowledge is going to come about if every single person sounds and thinks exactly the same.
I agree. And we're all reading this same article together in this class. All of our students are
Right.
going to read it. We've read it. Um, I think the temptation is that that students often feel like they have to like come up with something very original and um sometimes it's the important stuff is always going to be the important stuff.
Mhm.
It's what you bring to the important stuff that changes it.
Right.
So
Right.
I just think that these examples really show how different readers will bring different things, and that changes how you interact with a text. So I hope that's obvious to them as they get the chance to not only just watch us talk about it today, but as they get to engage with it, since we are going to give them some access to see parts of this document and like look at how we've annotated it together. So hopefully
Maybe
that
add
will
some of
help
their
them.
own or meet up with a friend.
Correct. So, or follow this example and find that, peer in their class that wants to engage in this way. So I'm going to stop sharing. Any final thoughts about annotation? Anything you want to leave our students with before we let them go for today?
I would say that there is a tendency, again, when I first started college, this seemed a little tedious. And my goal was just to read as quickly as I could, finish the assignment, and call it a day. But once I learned or trained myself, because it's a process, once I trained myself to annotate, I did better on my assignments. I understood the content more, my writing quality improved. And honestly, I even saved myself time because I didn't have to keep going back or keep forgetting different ideas I had. So if it's daunting now, that's okay, but I promise it pays off in the end.
I completely agree with all of those statements. So next week, we're going to talk to our students about what do we do with all those annotations, right? So we're reading the Shatilla article together, but they're all also doing their own research for their research projects, and they're reading lots of articles, and they're hopefully doing these kinds of annotations to their articles. And then we're going to kind of talk through this mystical and magical thing that we talk about in writing, which is synthesis. What does it
Yay.
mean to take all of these annotations and this engagement with a text and combine it into this beautiful thing called synthesis? We're going to talk about that on next week's podcast. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Compose Yourself.
Remember, writing is a process, and every word you write brings you closer to becoming the writer you want to be.
We hope you enjoyed today's discussion and that it makes clearer the topics you're exploring in this course. If you have any questions or comments, please reach out to your instructor.
Until next time, keep thinking critically
And always compose yourself.